Caddis Maximus here, this time with a quick review of the Harbor Freight Doyle 20-inch slip joint or groove joint, tongue and groove, channel lock pliers. Every tool has so many different names. Decided to pick these up because Harbor Freight has been refreshing, it seems like, a bunch of their products. They're really going through the store and putting out a bit more expensive but more improved models. Which is pretty nice. Now, Harbor Freight is now doing this under a house brand, and they have several different names such as Doyle and Quinn, etc. And I think that's one odd thing is why would you have Doyles and Quinns for like pliers? It should just be the same name. It's a little bit confusing to me. But other than that, it's obvious what they're doing. They're trying to pull away from the Centec, the Central Pneumatic, Pittsburgh, because those brands have become synonymous with lower quality tools, and so what they're trying to do is have a higher end or a different name where they're promoting their higher end products. Now these products are still very competitively priced. They're right around about half, sometimes more than half, sometimes a little less than half than the products that they're trying to compete with, such as channel locks in this case, or Knipex pliers, which would be the two the largest manufacturers of tongue and groove or slip joint pliers. Such is the case with these on sale on the shelf. These 20-inch pliers are $25, well, they're about $40 to $50 for an equivalent size set of channel locks. And I will be comparing these two channel locks. These are 16-inch channel locks. And you'll even get a little unboxing. So these aren't actually Taiwanese, these are Chinese. They have quite a bit of the usual suspects. They, high strength steel. They do not advertise what grade of steel, so that's one place where they do save money. Is the grade of steel probably isn't as good, and I would say not quite as good as channel lock. And that's one thing to remember, is that there's over 500 grades of magnetic or carbon steels recipes. And metals have recipes just like cooking foods, and there's just as many of them. More than 500 grades of the standard steels, another 150 grades of stainless steels, and then there are alloys, or super alloys, which really don't, they separate those into their own categories because they have such special properties. And so this could be a very high quality steel, but it could still be a very different composition from what the channel lock uses. And only certain kinds of tests, such as, stress tests, would really show evidence of that. Another thing about manufacturing quality is process control, controlling the temperature when you're forging it, heat treatment, etc. All those aspects make a difference into how well the final product works. However, they do advertise as having, standard induction hardened teeth and a hot rivet which stays tight. They run the rivet when it's hot, so when it cools down it tightens up some. So let's go and open up this package, and we'll take a few looks at it. I think these channel locks might be sufficient to do so. This is actually some pretty bulletproof packaging right here. This is a huge pair of channel locks, and I'm still having to put some force on this thing. Come on. And you want to be careful tearing apart this packaging. These edges right along here are razor sharp. You can get a serious cut from this stuff doing. Come on now. There we go. Alrighty. So we can see the finish. These don't really look so bad at all. They do laser etch them, which is a pretty standard. But in Harbor Freight tradition, there is no model or part number on the tool. Otherwise, they look pretty much like standard channel locks. Let's just go ahead and finish showing the close-up view of these here. Looks like they have pretty decent milling. How about the tongue? That's a pretty nice sized tongue. Now, one thing I can already tell from the finish is you can see by the way the light's reflecting that this surface, when it's ground, has quite a bit of curvature on each edge, which I suppose is okay, but there is a flatter grind on these channel locks just because you can see the way the reflection highlights the whole surface versus the way the reflection here falls off on each edge. So that's a you know, a little bit rougher of a finish. As we look down the pliers, we can actually see that they're pretty straight, so that's not so bad. As far as tightness, that's fine. These pliers tend to have a little bit of play in them, otherwise they easily get jammed up. I do like the amount of range that they have. You have quite a few steps on these. It's actually quite impressive. They do advertise 5 3/8 of jaw opening. Let's measure that. And I'm getting 5.5 inches across the center of the jaws in the full down position with the handles together. So that's actually a nice measurement. The second thing of note about measuring the way the length of these types of pliers are measured is the 20 inches would be from the top of the head and the top position down to the bottom of the handle. And we can see, or you can't see, that it is indeed 20 inches, so they're not lying about that, and they actually have a little bit more jaw capacity than they advertise. It's 5.5 inches. If we compare these to the channel locks, these are indeed 16-inch pliers. And I've measured these. They have about 3.5 inches of jaw opening. So proportionately, that's correct. So a 20-inch set of pliers is... Actually, it has a little bit... which is actually pretty good. So there is accurate advertising in the sizing. And, you know, I don't have the exact same size of channel locks to compare to, but it's kind of nice to compare because this set's 20% larger than the channel locks. Excuse me, that'd be 25% larger. We can see that the rivets are about the same size, so the rivet doesn't appear to be 20% larger, so I'll point that out. We can see on the back side, you know, this the grinding and finish work, which is portion of the tool cost is not as high quality on the Harbor Freights, and that's how that one reason they're getting more. They are more competitively priced. Excuse me. We can also see that the relative beam thick cross section area is about the same as the smaller channel locks, but it is a little wider. Actually, is it? We should take a measurement of that right there. We'll do it off the 1 inch. We've got, can't even see there, 3/4 of an inch at the base. Actually, it's about the same here. So there's another aspect. Proportionally speaking, these have less metal in them than the channel locks. Another thing I was going to mention is that they have not quite as thick a handles. The handles on this is actually slightly thinner than they are on the channel locks that are a smaller size, so they're also saving material there. Anyway, I just wanted to do a detailed comparison and review of these Doyles. I did end up getting these because they are significantly larger than the largest pair. I had just done a video about the channel locks and thought, gosh, it would be nice to have a couple large pairs of channel locks. Oftentimes you need to hold, you just need 2 pairs to hold one thing while you turn on another, and saw that the Harbor Freight had the even bigger 20-inch pair, and of course I do like oversized and large tools, so I decided to go ahead and pick these up, and we'll see how they turn out over time. I had read a viewer had gotten these, you know, per some recommendations from other Doyle videos. It may have been Doyle videos or just Harbor Freight videos. I even forget myself now. And for the price, I think they're absolutely fine, really, especially for the larger sizes. And they do make it easy. It's just 100%, you know, standard Harbor Freight lifetime tool guarantee. And these don't seem like they're going to be quite the traditional Harbor Freight tool where it's just going to break on you as soon as you, you know, put any real force on it. It seems like these will work just fine. But, you know, over long-term use, you know, by plumbers or other people who would use these pliers quite often or under heavy-duty situations, particularly when there's like sideways loads and dynamic loads on it, then they may have some issues. But the difference between these Doyles and the channel locks is not as dramatic as previous Harbor Freight products have been. And it's actually kind of nice to see Harbor Freight, you know, trying to put a little more effort again. People, my viewers who may have been shopping at Harbor Freight for a long time, we're talking 20 years or more, when they were much smaller may remember that they actually sold Bi-Scripts, they sold Makita tools. They actually had about 20 to 25% of their products were just the standard professional grade stuff. And then they just followed their customers. A lot of the cheaper stuff was really what was selling, and so then they just went whole hog into super cheap tools and have found over the long term, and now that they've gotten to be a huge corporation, that super cheap tools really isn't gonna, probably keep them going in the long term. So now they're reversing direction some and trying to replace with higher quality tools again, but keeping that budget conscious customer in mind. People who really are tradesmen and who use tools to make a living and put food on the table, or who really like high quality tools, will always want to have or try to get, professional grades items. But Harbor Freight does serve its purpose, which is for the weekend warrior, or a tool you're not going to use very often, or specifically a tool you're going to use in abusive situations, so you just don't want to spend the money on a nice pair of channel locks if you're just going to use them in real abusive situations, such as a hammer or using them as a pry bar. And I've seen that quite often. This shape of the handles on these does make it a handy pry bar in many situations, because the other handle can just be swung way out of the way. It's kind of interesting, but I've done that a few times to get CV axles out. Just the shape makes it reach into many tight spaces, and so that was one of my impetuses to get one of these. Anyway, I just wanted to do a quick review of these Doyles, because the Harbor Freight has put them out the shelf the last couple of months. I just hadn't got any of their slip joints, and really like the price of the large size ones, just because they're just so much cheaper for what seems like an okay tool. And quite frankly, the money I save from buying a set of channel locks, I could go buy a smaller set of channel locks that I do like and support both organizations. Anyway, that was kind of the end of a quick little bonus review of the Harbor Freight Doyle, made for professionals. Excuse me, precision engineered for professionals. They don't mention that engineering occurred more than a century ago. But kind of funny advertising. And generally speaking, for the price, I think these things will work out just fine for a vast majority of the people out there. And one last aspect I was just noticing here is that they have a couple wings on each side. And I kind of like that. That adds a bit of extra strength. Channel lock does that too, but on these 16 inches, the wing's only on the front, but not on the back side. Where on this, it's on both sides, so that does make sense. That is the one significant material increase that I can see between the 20 inches and those channel lock 16s. And then the other comment is they actually have a surprisingly wide range, and the fact that they open up all the way to 5.5 inches with the handles closed is actually surprising. That is a huge amount of range. There would be very few pipes besides plastic pipes that you'd effectively be able to turn that are that diameter. I've done reviews like on 4-inch pipe cutters and 4-inch pipe, iron pipe cutters and chain wrenches, and those things are huge. There's no way that you're going to use these to loosen up any kind of 5-inch iron pipe. You'd just use these to get it started threading in. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching, and please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.